It's Nolan. Now, before we get started, make sure y'all hitting that like button. Make sure y'all sharing it on your respective platforms. Let somebody know what we're doing today. Now, let's get into the show.
Ay, now take a good look at the channel. New black soprano, grand like a piano, equipped with plenty of ammo. Couple years ago was educating on the panels, nigga flying out the Nam game and hoes like it's Namco. Pity the fool, these niggas obtuse. I push threads off top like my name was Abdul. Had shouted screaming at me like she bumping Ja Rule. I bust down on the road and fuck a ride to school. I make content, but y'all content with the bullshit. Y'all watch shit that ain't hitting you with no sources. Coming at the dirty bitch was playing in them sewages. My steward, it just came and gave me a plate full of swordfish. Full-fledged rapper, preacher, trooper to the pulpit. Genuine spirit, I been dancing with that broomstick. Move switch, my rain. Crew switch, new team, my flow hot butane. I float like Luke Kane. Bicycle kick in my city, my niggas know me well. All I want is my liberty like that broken bell. I broke the shell, they sold for sale. My heart cold like polar bear. Solar flare, my opponent. Opposition push up dirt. I'm from a town where we always heard guns go burst. I had dreams of the ride, got my button up shirt, my pink polo. My homie used to smoke on purpose, no emotions, only motion. I'ma be coasting. Street sign, nigga posted. Fuck all the boasting. Me time, don't approach them. Get you some coaching before you get your ass roasted. Nigga, it's Nolan.
What's going on, beautiful people? It's the kid J Nolan here. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry, your number one source for music, entertainment, commentary, and breakdowns. Hope everybody's doing well out there this evening. In this video, we're going to be talking about T.I. in his quest to retain or regain the ownership of his masters. Those masters in question being the music that he put out, those albums that he put out during his time with Atlantic Records. So that would be trap music on up to shit. I don't even know the last album he put out. Was it Dime Trap? Because I think the Libra was independent. So he's trying to get his masters back. Apparently, he did a deal with a independent company in 2017 where I guess they got the masters from Atlantic, or he got the music. I don't know the exact details. I'm going to read the paperwork. He did a deal with them, and there was a clause in the contract that said that they would sell the masters back to him at a favorable price after a certain benchmark was met or something, right? He says that it should have been somewhere around the margin of about $3 million. He's claiming that they tried to sell him his own catalog back closer to the margin of $50 million. Chelsea Clinton. So now he's going down to the courthouse. He's filed a lawsuit and he's trying to get his masters back through this breach of contract clause. And I'm sure he wants some extra out of the deal. I'm not going to waste any time because, of course, we got about 18 pages of material to read through. So let's go ahead and get to this situation. Now, T.I. has been on a good run. Let him know has been doing his thing. Trauma Bond has been doing his thing. The battle with 50 Cent. Like, 2026 has been a very good year for T.I. You know what I mean? Atlanta's been treating him excellent. He's headlining Birthday Bash, which is basically our version of Summer Jam out here. He performed at Cardi B's concert. When she came to Atlanta. It's a lot of good things. So let's get to it. All right. United States District Court, Central District of California, Western Division. We have Clifford Joseph Harris Jr., a.k.a. T.I. and Grand Hustle LLC versus Cinq Recordings LLC, formerly known as Cinq Records. Okay? This is a demand for jury trial. This complaint is for breach of contract. All right. Nature of the action. Eager to boost his profile in the music industry, Cinq acquired from Atlantic Records in 2017 the sound recordings and audiovisual works comprising plaintiff's iconic Atlantic catalog. So I guess they got the music videos and everything too, including the worldwide copyrights and all other right, title, and interest in all such works, collectively the Atlantic catalog. Cinq sought and obtained plaintiff's consent for the acquisition in a 2017 side letter agreement. To secure plaintiff's consent, Cinq, among other things, gave plaintiffs an option to buy the Atlantic catalog from Cinq the option at a later date based on a predetermined purchase price formula that was very favorable to plaintiffs. Cinq regretted that it had agreed to the formula, and therefore, when plaintiffs timely exercised the option in September 2024, Cinq did everything it could to frustrate plaintiffs' efforts to complete the purchase in accordance with the Cinq agreement. Okay? So he says, eager to boost his profile in music because they have a lot of backing. They got a lot of investment into their company, but in 2017, that was not the case. They were trying to get a footprint into the music industry. So they did a side deal with T.I. where they got the catalog from Atlantic with his approval and said, yo, we'll agree to sell it back to you, right? There's some sort of equation or formula that equated a certain number that T.I. was comfortable with. And in September 2024, he tried to act on that agreement, and they've been trying to avoid it. Okay? The Cinq agreement required Cinq to provide GH with the purchase price for the Atlantic catalog in writing based on the purchase price formula upon receiving the option exercise. However, Cinq made no attempt to comply with this obligation for 6 months, i.e. until March 2025. Even then, Cinq disregarded the formula, which I find to be very interesting because if you pull up T.I.'s catalog on any streaming platform, I think all the albums do say Grand Hustle, but apparently that's only on its face. Even then, they disregarded the formula. The formula required Cinq to add up a defined subset of revenues that derive from the Atlantic catalog over a specified 1-year period, deduct from that sum the compensation to which plaintiffs were entitled during the same time period, and multiply the difference by 12. Knowing the formula would yield a low purchase price because of the limited revenue streams it included, Cinq sought to artificially inflate the formula's results. Okay? So once they figured out that they weren't going to get as much as they would have liked for an artist of T.I.'s magnitude, they then start trying to inflate the formula. Cinq did so by including significant revenue streams that the formula expressly excludes, and by greatly understating the compensation to which plaintiffs were entitled. Using these tactics, Cinq sought to extract a purchase price from plaintiffs that was nearly 20 times higher than the price mandated by the parties' agreed upon formula, demanding approximately $52 million instead of the $2.4 to $3 million due under the formula in the Cinq agreement. And that 52 sounds pretty much in line with what other artists have actually sold their catalogs for. You know what I'm saying? People with hits, people that have multiple successful albums. I think Future did like a $50 million deal for the first half of his catalog. He continues to own his current catalog, but he sold all of his music up until like 2022 or something like that, and got $50 million. So I can see why they're trying to get 52 out of him, because it's like, whoa, we would love to get what it's worth. T.I. is saying, I did this deal specifically because I knew I could get it back based on this formula, and y'all had certain verbiage in there that was in my favor. So they wanted $52 million instead of the $2.4 to $3 million due under the formula in the Cinq agreement. Cinq pursued this strategy despite the fact that it drafted the Cinq agreement and devised the formula it refused to apply. So Tip is saying, this is what y'all brought to the table. I simply obliged because I knew what I could do. Cinq has no conceivable justification for its wrongdoing and therefore has breached its contractual obligations to plaintiffs, entitling them to specific performance damages, attorney's fees, and other relief. Now, why T.I. would have even allowed them to do it in the first place if he had access to do it is probably because he didn't have the infrastructure in 2017 to continue to exploit his music at that time, right? And this takes me back to Lupe Fiasco, who was also signed to Atlantic once upon a time for a very long time, much longer than he actually intended to. And he said that he went to Leor Cohen, who used to be the CEO of the company, and he wanted his masters back once upon a time. And Leor said, well, what are you going to do with him? Walk around with him in a suitcase? You know? And what he got out of that was, I can give you your masters, but what are you going to do with them? How are you going to continue to monetize off of them? Do you have, the proper sync team? And when I say sync, I mean the people that could get your music in TV, film, commercials, movies, etc. Keep your music playing at ball games and stuff like that, because there has to be agreements in place for all of that stuff to be a thing. And if you don't have those things in place, if you don't have a publishing administration person that's going to keep all the checks and balances on that, then you're going to be probably just owning your music, but not really making the money that you could. Now, of course, it don't matter. If I say I want my shit back and it's available to me, give me my shit back or let me buy it back. But I think that's the reason why T.I. did that, was because Sync Music probably had, at bare minimum, the team that could continue to keep his music flowing outside of, the fans just listening to it. We'll continue though. So Sync has no conceivable justification for its wrongdoing and therefore has breached its contractual obligations, entitling them to specific performance, damages, attorney's fees, and other relief. Now from here, we're not going to actually go into all of the location and all that stuff, simply because that's not what we need. Okay? Factual background. The plaintiffs entered into an agreement with Atlantic dated as March 4th, 2003. That's when T.I. signed with Atlantic, right before the trap music album, where they agreed to provide T.I.'s exclusive recording services to Atlantic. Plaintiffs and Atlantic amended their agreement as of August 7th, 2006. The renegotiation process that he actually played out on the album, if y'all remember T.I. versus T.I.P., he actually had Leor Cohen on the album, and he said, I ain't turning in the album, Jack, or something like that. Get it like the Red Cross. Right? If y'all don't give me this deal, ain't gonna be no album. So that's when they renegotiated and amended some of his contract. And two other occasions, the agreement and all amendments, collectively the Atlantic agreement. Upon Sync's acquisition of the Atlantic catalog in 2017, Atlantic assigned to Sync, and Sync assumed all of Atlantic's rights and obligations to plaintiffs under the Atlantic agreement. In addition to confirming Sync's assumption of Atlantic's rights and obligations under the Atlantic agreement, the Sync agreement amends certain provisions of the Atlantic agreement. Except as amended, the Sync agreement expressly ratifies and confirms the Atlantic agreement and acknowledges that the Atlantic agreement shall remain in full force and effect. The Sync agreement and the Atlantic agreement constitute the entire agreement between Sync and plaintiffs. Now, let's get into what was actually agreed upon. Plaintiffs delivered 7 albums to Atlantic under the Atlantic agreement. So that would be Trap Music, Urban Legend, King, T.I. vs. T.I.P., Paper Trail, No Mercy, and Trouble Man. Oh, so Trouble Man was the last album. So Dime Trap was independent too. I didn't know that. The Atlantic agreement required Atlantic to credit royalties to plaintiff's royalty account based on Atlantic's exploitation of the sound recordings and audiovisual works that plaintiffs delivered to Atlantic by applying the applicable royalty rate specified in the Atlantic agreement to the applicable royalty-based price in respect of net sales of the record concerned. Notwithstanding, the royalty rate compensation, if any of the albums delivered under the Atlantic agreement sold more than 1.5 million, units within 24 months of its initial U.S. commercial release, then with respect to all sound recordings and audiovisual works delivered to Atlantic after the date on which such benchmark was surpassed, plaintiffs would be entitled to a larger portion of the revenues that such sound recordings and audiovisual works generate. Specifically, in such event, the Atlantic agreement required Atlantic to accrue plaintiff's royalty account a royalty equal to 50% of the net profits in lieu of the royalty rate compensation provided for in paragraph 9. So it's a 50-50 deal, but if he sold more than 1.5 million units within 2 years of the album's release, and a lot of those albums are double platinum today, then they would give him an increase on his royalty portion. Okay? So King exceeded the net profits benchmark, thus in entering into the 2006 amendment, Atlantic expressly acknowledged that paragraph 9A shall apply to LP4, T.I. vs. T.I.P., all other committed albums subsequent to LP4, and any records solely derived therefrom. So his royalty rate increased. In addition to the enhanced compensation applicable to sound recordings and audiovisual works delivered after conversion date, the Atlantic Agreement entitled plaintiffs to net profit royalty compensation instead of royalty rate compensation on all sound recordings and audiovisual works delivered to Atlantic prior to the conversion date, collectively LP1 to LP3 at such time, if any, as plaintiff's royalty rate compensation account becomes recouped after the conversion date. Excuse me. The Cinq agreement expressly acknowledges that plaintiff's royalty rate compensation account was recouped as of April 2017, clearly in reference to paragraph 9AD of the Atlantic Agreement. Therefore, under the Atlantic Agreement, plaintiffs have been entitled to net profit royalty compensation on the entire Atlantic catalog from at least April 2017 forward. Separate and apart from its financial terms, the Atlantic Agreement underscores the unique value of the sound recordings comprising the Atlantic catalog and the rights, including the worldwide copyrights they embody in setting forth Atlantic's entitlement to injunctive and other equitable relief. This looks like a quote from the contract. You expressly acknowledge that the artist's services hereunder are of a special, unique, and intellectual character which gives them peculiar value, very T.I.-ish, and that in the event of a breach or threatened breach by you or artists of any term, condition, or covenant hereof, company will be caused immediate irreparable injury. You expressly agree that companies shall be entitled to injunctive and other equitable relief as permitted by law to prevent a breach or threatened breach of this agreement or any portion thereof by you or artist, which relief shall be in addition to any other rights or remedies for damages or otherwise available to company, which he's trying to bring them to task for today. In entering the Cinq agreement in 2017, Cinq granted the option discussed in paragraph 1 above based on the following terms. Grand Hustle shall have the option to purchase the Atlantic catalog on a quit claim basis and at a purchase price which shall be calculated at a value equal to a 12 multiple of the net profits of the catalog during the 1-year period commencing on May 1st, 2023 and ending on April 30th, 2024. The NP purchase formula. The term NP shall be redefined as gross receipts on an accrual basis minus artist and Grand Hustle's royalty participation for the purpose of illustration and for the avoidance of doubt. By way of example, if gross receipts during the period is $2 million and royalties are $850,000, the NP will be 1.15 million and the purchase price would then be 13.8 million. Okay? So if he made $2 million off the music and the royalty rate was 850, that would bring it to 1.150, and then you would multiply that by 12, which would equal out to $13.8 million. If during that time period he made $2 million. And remember, this is off music that is now 15 to 20 years old. So the likelihood of it producing $2 million, I don't really know. Although T.I. does remain popular. The Cinq agreement required GH to exercise, okay, so GH is Grand Hustle, to exercise the option between May 1st, 2024 and April 30th, 2026, the option period. The Sync agreement prescribes the following procedure for GH to exercise the option and for Sync to furnish the purchase price. Exercise of the option by Grand Hustle shall be tendering during the option period. Notice pursuant to the notice provisions in paragraph 9 below of GH's intent to purchase the Atlantic catalog, at which point Sync shall provide Grand Hustle with the purchase price in writing based on the NP purchase formula, and GH shall have until the end of the option period to execute a mutually satisfactory purchase sale agreement and pay to Sync the purchase price. Grand Hustle timely exercised the option on September 30th, 2024, very interesting date, in accordance with the Sync agreement's notice provisions. Because the Sync agreement does not define the term gross receipts used in the NP purchase formula, the Sync agreement incorporates by reference the Atlantic agreement's definition of this term. Unless otherwise noted, capitalized terms used but not otherwise defined have the meaning set forth. The Atlantic agreement defines gross receipts in relevant part as all royalties and flat fee payments actually earned and received by company in the United States and specifically attributed to the applicable exploitation of the recordings and or videos concerned. The gross receipts definition excludes at least two significant revenue streams from the NP purchase formula. First, the gross receipts definition bars any license fees that Sync receives from Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and other digital service providers because such fees are not specifically attributed to exploitations of the Atlantic catalog, but rather are for exploitations of the entire repertoire of musical works under Sync's control. So there's some interesting language in here that they're trying to take advantage of to say, hey, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and other DSPs don't actually account for the royalties in this gross receipts definition that we have on paper. Okay? Because it was common knowledge when the parties entered into the Sync agreement in 2017 that audio streaming and video streaming via the DSPs had become the main driver of music industry growth and revenues, Sync had ample reason to know then that the DSP license fees exclusion would have a significant impact on the NP purchase formula when and if plaintiffs exercise the option. So basically, T.I. already knew that they were making some omissions in their contract that would work to his favor. And he expected to take advantage of the situation. Now, what this agreement was between him and Sync, like, because it seems like once he became a free agent from Atlantic, I don't know if Sync bought him out the deal in exchange for the masters for a certain period of time or what, or if he had already just exhausted his contract. But Sync had to have done something in there that made this appealing to T.I. for him to even allow them to have it. But of course, he did it under the agreement that he would get it back. Okay. Second, the gross receipts definition prohibits consideration of any revenues from exploitations of the Atlantic catalog outside the United States. So the second part that he's leaning on is you actually don't get to use the royalties accrued from outside the US. My global sales, my royalties from the rest of the globe are omitted. Y'all can only use the figures from the United States. They say that Sync chose not to modify the gross receipts definition, even though it could have, because they drafted the Sync agreement, forecloses any good faith argument that Sync did not intend to be bound by the exclusion of DSP license fees and foreign revenues from gross receipts, or that Sync should not be otherwise bound by the gross receipts definition. Now, only thing that I am curious about here is if under the court the DSP license fees will be viewed the same as the DSP royalties. Because I believe the license fees that these platforms pay to the labels is not the same as the royalties that the DSPs pay to the labels. So I don't know. I don't know for certain if this is going to hold up, but we shall see. The royalty participation that Sync must deduct from gross receipts under the NP purchase formula includes all amounts that Sync accrued or should have accrued for plaintiffs as royalty rate compensation and or net profit royalty compensation in accordance with the Atlantic Agreement or as other contractually required royalty compensation. During the formula's May 1st, 2023 through April 30th, 2024 measuring period. Such other royalty compensation includes, without limitation, 50% of the label's share of Sound Exchange royalties paid or credited to Sync for exploitations of the Atlantic catalog during the measuring period. And Sound Exchange, for those that don't know, is basically internet radio royalties and like royalties for platforms that you can't actually choose what you're listening to. So like Pandora, those streams pay out to Sound Exchange. Okay, so non-interactive streams. So 50% of that also goes to them, which royalty Sync undertook to pay plaintiffs in the Sync agreement. Sync's serial failures to adhere to its option-related obligations. As noted in paragraphs 25 and 26 above, GH timely exercised the option on September 30th in 2024 in accordance with Sync's agreement notice provisions, at which point Sync was to provide Grand Hustle with the purchase price in writing based on the NP purchase formula, and they would have until the end of the option period, right? And be clear, if this were the other way around, Sync Music would definitely be trying to use these same clauses in the contract in order to get what they wanted out of T.I., which is what they were doing. So we'll see how this thing plays out. Sync did not comply with its obligation under the agreement to provide purchase price in writing to GH based on the NP purchase formula. Instead of providing the purchase price in writing shortly after, they made no attempt to fulfill the obligation until it sent plaintiffs a purported purchase price calculation on March 25th, 2025. Sync dragged its feet for 6 months, notwithstanding the fact that it knew at the time it entered into the Sync agreement in April 2017 that it likely would need to go this process not long after the May 1st, 2024 start of the option period. So they did a 7-year deal, and at that point, T.I. will have the option to buy back, right? If he so decided to exercise that, which is actually pretty standard after 7 years. Like, I want my shit back, homie. Even worse, the March 2025 calculation makes clear that Sync utterly and purposefully failed to comply with the NP purchase formula. Sync departed from the NP purchase formula in order to significantly inflate the price it presented to plaintiffs, expecting that doing so would trigger a negotiation that would yield a better outcome than Sync otherwise would be able to obtain had it abided by the parties' agreement from the outset. What is this in the footnotes here? But for a February 21st, 2025 demand letter that plaintiffs' litigation counsel sent Sync concerning its ongoing failure to provide the purchase price for the Atlantic catalog and other issues, Sync would have continued to stonewall plaintiffs. So they sent the demand letter February 21st last year saying, hey, y'all ignoring us. What the fuck going on? Instead of basing its gross receipts calculation on the limited revenue streams comprising gross receipts as the Sync agreement expressly requires, Sync used a made-up version of gross revenues. Sync included DSP license fees and foreign revenues that Sync received during the measuring period, among other streams, in its revenue side calculation, even though, as discussed in paragraphs 27 through 32 above, the gross receipts definition expressly excludes such amounts. Because again, whatever they made, they had a certain equation where they would multiply and all that stuff at a 12x value. Sync's departure from the contractual definition of gross receipts resulted in an exaggerated and inaccurate revenue side starting point from which Sync deducted plaintiff's royalty participation, which Sync also miscalculated. To drive up the purchase price even further, Sync significantly undervalued the amount of plaintiff's royalty participation during the measuring period. Contrary to the NP purchase formula's requirement, Sync excluded from the royalty participation the majority of compensation that plaintiffs received or should have received during the measuring period. Such excluded amounts included, among other things, the entirety of the net profit royalty compensation, sound exchange royalties, and other royalty compensation paid or due to plaintiffs during the measuring period. These additional contractual departures allowed Sync to reduce plaintiffs' royalty participation far below the amount to which the Atlantic Agreement and Sync Agreement entitled them. By minimizing plaintiffs' royalty participation in this fashion, Sync was able to artificially maximize the NP to which it applied the 12 multiple under the NP purchase formula and come up with the significantly overstated purchase price of approximately $52 million that it presented to plaintiffs. Upon information and belief, including based on accountings for the measuring period that plaintiffs received from Sync and Sound Exchange, Sync did not earn and receive in the United States during the measuring period any flat fee payments that were specifically attributed to exploitations of the Atlantic catalog in whole or in part. The Sound Exchange royalties that Sync earned and received in the United States during the measuring period amounted to at least $400,000, half of which Sync was obligated but failed to remit to plaintiffs. So there's another $200,000 that they didn't even pay. Sync earned and received in the United States during the measuring period only a nominal amount of royalties from digital downloads and physical exploitation specifically attributed to the Atlantic catalog. Based on the foregoing and upon information and belief, after deducting plaintiff's royalty participation from the measuring period from Sync's gross receipts during the measuring period, the NP is approximately $200,000 to $250,000, which under the NP purchase formula yields a purchase price in the range of $2.4 to $3 million. Sync thus manipulated the gross receipts and royalty participation provisions in the Sync agreement to suit its own ends and deny plaintiffs the benefit of the option, which was one of the principal reasons they agreed to consent to the sale of the Atlantic catalog to Sync and enter into the Sync agreement in the first place. The Sync agreement makes the Atlantic agreement subject to California law. In entering into the Sync agreement, Sync chose to have California law govern the Atlantic agreement. Specifically, Sync deleted the New York choice of law clause in paragraph 31B of the Atlantic agreement and replaced it with a California choice of law clause as follows. Governing law, section 31B of the Atlantic agreement shall be, as of the effective date, deleted in its entirety and shall be replaced with the following. This agreement has been entered into in the state of California, and its validity, construction, interpretation, and legal effect shall be governed by the laws of the state of California, applicable to contracts entered into and performed entirely within the state of California. In doing so, Sync brought the Atlantic agreement within the purview of all applicable laws of the state of California, including without limitation the reciprocal fee shifting provisions in California Civil Code 1717A. Interesting. The Atlantic agreement triggers the application of this statute to this lawsuit as a result of the indemnification, obligations that the Atlantic agreement imposes on plaintiffs. You agree to and do hereby indemnify, save, and hold company and its principal licensee harmless from any and all loss, damage, liability, and other expense, including anticipated and actual court costs, expenses, and reasonable outside attorney's fees arising out of, connected with, or as a result of any inconsistency with, failure of, or breach or threatened breach by you or artists of any warranty, representation, agreement, undertaken, or covenant contained in this agreement, including without limitation any claim by any third party in connection with the foregoing, provided that such claim has been settled with your consent or reduced to judgment. Atlantic Agreement 15B, emphasis added by their terms. These obligations, including those requiring plaintiffs to pay Cinc's court costs, expenses, and reasonable outside attorneys' fees, apply not just to third-party claims against Cinq arising from alleged wrongdoing by plaintiffs, but also to breach of contract claims that Cinq may have against plaintiffs unrelated to any such third-party claims. Because the Cinq Agreement replaces the New York choice of law clause in the Atlantic Agreement with a California choice of law clause, and that also applies to the Cinq Agreement, the cost, expense, and fee shifting provisions in paragraph 15B of the Atlantic Agreement quoted in the preceding paragraph entitled Plaintiffs to recover from Cinq the costs, expenses, and reasonable outside attorneys' fees that plaintiffs incur in connection with this lawsuit. First claim for relief, breach of contract. Upon acquiring the Atlantic catalog from Atlantic, Cinq assumed Atlantic's rights and obligations under and became plaintiff's counterparty to the Atlantic Agreement. Plaintiffs and Cinq are also parties to the Cinq Agreement. The Atlantic Agreement and the Cinq Agreement are valid and enforceable contracts. Plaintiffs have fully performed their obligations under the Atlantic Agreement and the Cinq Agreement, or such performance has been excused, including without limitation, as a result of Cinc's prevention and or frustration of plaintiff's performance. Cinq has breached its obligations under the Cinq Agreement and Atlantic Agreement by, among other things, failing to provide to plaintiffs within a reasonable time after the 2024 option exercise a written computation of the purchase price for the Atlantic catalog in accordance with the NP purchase formula, including without limitation the gross receipts definition in the Atlantic Agreement that the Cinq Agreement incorporates by reference, and 2, the royalty participation of which plaintiffs are entitled under the Atlantic Agreement and the Cinq Agreement. As a direct and proximate result of Cinc's breach of the Cinq Agreement and Atlantic Agreement as set forth above, plaintiffs have sustained damages, including without limitation 1, being denied the right to acquire the sound recordings and audiovisual works comprising and all rights, including the worldwide copyrights in the Atlantic catalog for $2.4 million to $3 million purchase price, as the NP purchase formula provides, instead of the approximately $52 million purchase price demanded by Cinq. And 2, the delayed enjoyment of the rights and benefits attendant to ownership of the Atlantic catalog starting at a reasonable time after the option exercise, such as, among other things, the receipt of the various revenue streams that the catalog generates, the annual value of which is in excess of $1 million. With respect to the principal harm, and without waiving their right to seek money damages in the alternative, plaintiffs seek specific performance of Cinc's obligations under paragraph 3 of the Cinq Agreement to 1, calculate the purchase price for the Atlantic catalog in strict accordance with the NP purchase formula. 2, provide such purchase price to plaintiffs in writing. 3, enter into a mutually satisfactory agreement for the sale to plaintiffs of the sound recordings and audiovisual works comprising and the worldwide copyrights and all other rights in the Atlantic catalog based on the purchase price. And 4, convey such sound recordings, audiovisual works, and rights to plaintiffs upon entering into such agreement and receiving the purchase price from plaintiffs. Plaintiffs are entitled to specific performance to remedy the principal harm because 1, the terms of the Cinq Agreement, including the specific terms in paragraph 3, for which plaintiffs seek specific performance, are sufficiently definite. Plaintiffs provided adequate consideration for Cinc's undertakings in the Cinq Agreement, including without limitation by providing their consent to Cinc's acquisition of the Atlantic catalog. 3, the specific performance sought is substantially similar, if not identical, to the terms of the Cinq Agreement as the remedy seeks Cinc's compliance with the terms of paragraph 3 thereof. Cinq already has received the benefits of plaintiff's full performance under the Cinq Agreement and the Atlantic Agreement, and in any event, the remedies available to the parties are mutual. And 5, the special and unique character of the sound recordings comprising and the worldwide copyrights and other rights in the Atlantic catalog, including as set forth in paragraph 22 above, as well as the intangible legacy value of the Atlantic catalog for plaintiffs, confirmed that money damages cannot fully compensate them for the principal harm, and therefore that they do not have an adequate remedy at law. Plaintiffs also seek at least $1.5 million from Cinq for the delayed damages that plaintiffs have sustained to date, and an additional amount for the delayed damages that plaintiffs incur hereafter through the date on which the parties consummate the sale of the Atlantic catalog to plaintiffs. So not only does he want his masters, he wants $1.5 million in return. He wants his legal fees. He wants an additional $200,000 from his sound exchange royalties that he was supposed to get 50% of the $400. So he trying to run it up. Better let him know. Prayer. Plaintiffs pray for judgment as follows. On the first claim for relief for breach of contract, that Cinq be required to specifically perform its obligations under paragraph 3 of the Cinq agreement to calculate the purchase price for the Atlantic catalog in strict accordance with the NP purchase formula. 2, provide such purchase price to plaintiffs in writing. 3, enter into a mutually satisfactory agreement for the sale to plaintiffs of the sound recording and audiovisual works comprising and the worldwide copyrights and all other rights in the Atlantic catalog based on the purchase price, and convey such sound recordings, audiovisual works, and rights to plaintiffs after entering into such agreement and receiving the purchase price from plaintiffs. So he still wants to pay his fair amount. Like, he don't want him to just hand it over. He's saying, hey, just handle the equation correctly and I will pay. Because I know what I'm expecting to pay, $2.4 to $3 million. I got it. Let me hold something, man. On the first claim for relief for breach of contract, that Cinq be required to pay delay damages to plaintiffs in an amount equal to all revenues received by or credited to Cinq for any and all exploitations of the Atlantic catalog in whole or in part from and after a reasonable time following the option exercised through and including the date of judgment, which amount plaintiffs believe is no less than $1.5 million currently and will continue to increase hereafter. For an equal amount to plaintiff's court costs, expenses, and reasonable outside attorney's fees in accordance with paragraph 12 of the Cinq agreement, paragraph 15B of the Atlantic agreement, and California Civil Code 1717A. For pre-judgment and post-judgment interest on all sums awarded, and for costs allowed by the federal rules of civil procedures and the local rules of this court, and for such other and further relief as the court deems just and proper. All right, so that is T.I.'s full lawsuit to Cinq Music, saying, y'all trying to gank me out of goddamn $52 million to get my shit back. He says, we're going to have to do this in court. Let me pay y'all $2.5, $3 million. Get y'all out my hair. I get out about y'all's. And I can move forward. Okay? And I have seen recently that T.I. said he actually kind of regretted leaving Atlantic because now everything is on him as far as his music career. But now everything is going swell with Empire, with the onset of his alleged final album. He still has the PSC album coming too. So look out for that. And from what it sounds like here, Cinq Music at the time in 2017, they were kind of inexperienced. They were new to the marketplace. They were looking for, popular acts to associate their brand with and to get into business with so that they could build up some brand value in the marketplace, attract others to see let's see what they're doing for Tip. Let's see how they handling his catalog and others, whoever else they may have done deals with. And it looked like T.I. and his legal team, they had a couple little tricks up their sleeve to say, okay, we'll do business with you. We'll allow you to hold on to the music. You know what I'm saying? We'll do a 7-year deal. After 7 years, I have the option. Y'all could hit me with, a reasonable price. And if it looks good to me, I'll buy it back. If not, I'll let you keep it. Because once you exercise the option, then you go into another term. So he's saying, but they significantly inflated the value, and now they're trying to go around what they actually put in the paperwork so that they can extract more money out of me for this music. Because y'all know I'm not finna do no more business with your ass. So now y'all want to get this big paycheck. I'm always going to advocate for artists to get their music back. I'm always going to advocate for artists in general. Unless you do some shit that just is completely unethical. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully this works out in T.I.'s favor. I don't think this is going to be a quick process, so we'll just have to keep an eye on it. But let me know what y'all think of all this down below in the comments. Be sure to like and share this video. If this is your first time seeing me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, become an insider. I will see y'all on the next one. Y'all be good out there, man. Peace.
Yeah, family over fame in this bitch, yeah. The glory of living righteous is setting in. My street knowledge and education's a perfect blend. Young mogul, independent, I've been setting trends. The first one from my family to be faithfully wed. Fuck niggas and the horses that they riding on. I see this shit from all angles like a polygon. I'm never politicking, the drama be piling on. Father and great son acknowledged like I'm Bobby Bonds. Conversation with my lady about the paper route. 5 sit bank accounts every day I make it count. They down talking my commentary for hating now. Well, I can take it cause I'm bodying your favorite now, please. I can do this shit in my sleep. I been writing for these niggas, y'all read it and weep. I been fighting these niggas if you speak on the street. I turn your birthday party into New Year's Eve. Don't let me take it there. We ain't playing fair. This the ATL, Southside nigga moving furniture like Wayfair. Life on hold, no insurance for your healthcare. Lifeline gone, so you wanna be a millionaire? Well, let me tell you about this world I built. The women I dodged, the niggas that I read for filth. The sympathy calls, consulting for the stakes I built. I had